This is the cattle industry poem from the American West, GCSE, looking at the cattle industry from around 1862 to around 1890. When Texans got home from the war, they found their longhorn roaming free. There were so many cows down in Texas that they cost but a $5 fee. But Goodnight and Loving developed a plan to make their cattle worth 4 times more. They drove 2,000 cows north from Texas. In New Mexico, they were no longer poor. They sold their longhorns to government agents to keep the reservation Indians fed. Goodnight drove more north to Wyoming, but Comanche made Loving quite dead. Yet Goodnight and Loving had opened the way for other cowboys. Great profits were seen, helped in their plan by Joseph McCoy, who built a cow town called Abilene. McCoy was a Chicago businessman who spotted a business to crack. He built saloons, hotels, and cattle pens right next to the railroad track. The cowboys could ride up from Texas, driving giant herds across the plain, braving the stampedes and weather to put their longhorns onto a train. McCoy gave them cash for their troubles, which they spent in his hotels and bars. McCoy sent the cows to Chicago, worth 10 times more on the railroad cars. But the Great Plains were getting more crowded. More track was laid every year. John Illiff had developed another new plan. He saw ranches and profits quite clear. John Illiff had bought cows off Goodnight, then fattened them up on the plain. He didn't waste time on the long drive, just built his ranch next to the train. His profits were huge and kept growing, so investors got in on the act. The cattle barons bought up Colorado. Cattle ranches became the new fact. The life of the cowboys was changing as more of them worked on the plains. The day of the long drives was ending. For the boys, there were losses and gains. Cowboys that had excitement and danger, stampeding cattle could leave a man dead, protecting stock from Indians and rustlers with a rattlesnake under his bed. Months on the trails was darn tiring. The work paid $1 a day. When they finally sold all the cattle, those boys would then go out and play. A shave and a bath with some new clothes, then out on the town for some fun, gambling and drinking and fighting, until all 6 months' pay had been done. At springtime they started the roundup, gathered herds out in that open range. This had been the way down in Texas. The Great Plains would bring on a change. The winters in Texas were never too cold. The cows could survive on their own, but up north in the states like Montana, the cold chilled those cows to the bone. Snow stopped the cattle reaching the grass. Frozen rivers meant they had little to drink. The ranch hands went out in the blizzards, so the size of the herds didn't shrink. 1870 is a boom time for cattle barons, as the dollars just kept pouring in. Too many cows led to much overstocking, meaning cattle began to get thin. Too much beef in those eastern states meant the price of meat was dropping. Refrigerated rail cars could reach any state, but the beef bonanza bubble was popping. Ranchers kept hold of their cattle for now, waiting for prices to climb. With the grassland eroding, those cattle got slimmer, made worse when fire and drought did combine. Then came the winter, 86, 87, when the temperature dropped -50. Those poor weakened cows on the open range, in thousands they died mighty swiftly. Millions of cows died across the Great Plains, 360,000 in Montana alone. Many of the ranches went bankrupt. Open range ranching was blown. The smaller ranches had done a bit better. They located their cows in the snow. They would bring them in closer for shelter when those isolating blizzards did blow. Small ranches then became the new model of how the beef industry would look. The barbed wire now crisscrossed the prairie with high quality meat then to cook. Cowboys were now known as ranch hands, living less interesting lives, branding, dehorning, fixing barbed wire, a yearly roundup, but no cattle drives. Living in bunkhouses, riding the line, leaking roofs and beds full of lice, harvesting hay for the winter, for less danger, this was the price.